Welcome to back my channel Coin Worth Million. This channel is a special place where every video brings you new knowledge, entertainment, and exciting experiences. Here Coins Worth you will find informative content, engaging stories, and everything that sparks your curiosity. Our goal is to make every moment enjoyable, help you learn something new, and be a part of this growing family. So join us and start this wonderful journey today. The 1968 10 New Pence coin occupies a special place in the story of British money because it was one of the very first decimal coins issued in the United Kingdom, marking the historic transition from the centuries-old system of pounds, shillings, and pence to the modern decimal currency system. Before 1971, Britain used a currency system that dated back to medieval times, in which 1 pound was equal to 20 shillings and each shilling was equal to 12 pence, making 240 pence to the pound. This system, although deeply ingrained in British tradition and commerce, was notoriously difficult to calculate with, especially for international trade and modernizing economic structures. As the 20th century advanced, more and more countries adopted decimalized currency, which made Britain's old system look increasingly outdated. By the 1960s, political and economic momentum had gathered for reform, and Parliament eventually decided that the United Kingdom would adopt a decimal system in 1971. However, in order to prepare the public and accustom them to the new coins, the Royal Mint began issuing certain decimal coins before the official decimal day, and the 1968 10 New Pence coin was one of those pioneers. The design of the 1968 10 New Pence coin was carefully considered, not only for its aesthetic qualities but also for its symbolic significance. The obverse, as with all coins of the era, carried the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, who by then had already reigned for more than 15 years. The portrait used was the second definitive portrait of Elizabeth II, created by Arnold Machin, one of Britain's most respected sculptors of the 20th century. Machin's effigy of the Queen depicted her wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, which had been a wedding gift from Queen Mary, her grandmother. This portrait was more youthful and less formal than the earlier portrait by Mary Gillick, and it became one of the most familiar images of the Queen, used on coins for decades. Around the portrait were the words, Elizabeth II DG Reg FD, an abbreviation of the Latin Dei Gratia Regina Fidei Defensor, meaning, Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen, Defender of the Faith. This inscription reflected both her constitutional role and her position as Supreme Governor of the Church of England. The reverse of the coin, however, was the real point of historical interest. For the 10 New Pence, the Royal Mint chose to revive the design of the famous lion from the crest of England, a heraldic symbol of strength and pride. This motif was designed by Christopher Ironside, who produced a series of reverses for Britain's first decimal coins. The lion passant gardant, walking with one forepaw raised and head turned outward, was instantly recognizable as a symbol of England's monarchy and martial tradition, a link between the new decimal coinage and centuries of heraldic iconography. Above the lion were the words, New Pence, a phrase deliberately chosen to distinguish the coin from the old pre-decimal pence. Below the lion was the denomination, 10. This simple, bold design was intended to make the coin instantly clear to both new users and international observers, while still retaining a deep link to Britain's historic imagery. Physically, the 1968 10 New Pence coin was a relatively large and heavy coin compared to modern 10p pieces. It was struck in cupronickel, an alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel, which gave it a silver-like appearance, durability, and resistance to corrosion. The coin weighed 11.31 grams and had a diameter of 28.5 millimeters, making it similar in size to the old florin coin, which it effectively replaced in circulation. Indeed, the florin had been a forward-looking coin when it was first issued in the 19th century, as it was worth 1/10 of a pound and thus already suited to a decimal system. By the time decimalisation was planned, the florin's equivalence to the 10 New Pence meant that the transition would be smoother for the public, as they were already familiar with a coin of that size and approximate value. Thus, In a sense, the 1968 10 New Pence was not just a new coin, but also the inheritor of the florin's place in the monetary system. The issuance of the 1968 10 New Pence coin, alongside the 5 New Pence, was also significant because these were the first decimal coins released into circulation, several years before Decimal Day in 1971. Their early introduction was a deliberate government strategy to give the public time to become familiar with decimal values and to allow businesses, banks, and the general public to adapt gradually to the new system. Shops, cash registers, and accounting systems could begin accommodating these coins ahead of the full changeover, easing what might otherwise have been a confusing and disruptive transition. For many Britons, the arrival of the 1968 10 New Pence coin was their first tangible encounter with the idea of decimalisation, and so it carried with it not just financial but also cultural symbolism, the modernization of Britain in a rapidly globalizing world. Collectors today view the 1968 10 New Pence as an especially interesting piece because it represents a first in the decimal coinage series. Millions of them were struck, so the coin is not particularly rare in ordinary condition, but for those interested in the history of British currency, it marks the beginning of an entirely new era. Over the years, the coin itself underwent significant changes. In 1982, the inscription on decimal coins was changed from New Pence to simply 10 pence, as the novelty of the new system had worn off and it was no longer necessary to distinguish it from the old. Later still, in 1992, the coin was drastically reduced in size, and the original large 10p coins, including the 1968 issue, were withdrawn from circulation. This makes the original large 10 New Pence coins an artifact of a transitional period in British money, too large and heavy for modern tastes, but deeply nostalgic for those who remember them jingling in their pockets in the 1970s and 1980s. The historical context of the coin also gives it a deeper resonance. The 1960s were a period of profound change in Britain. The empire was dissolving, society was liberalizing, and modernization was the watchword of the government. Decimalisation was not merely a financial reform but also a symbolic step into the future, aligning Britain with the metric tendencies of Europe and the wider world. The 1968 10 New Pence coin thus sits at the crossroads of tradition and progress. On the one hand, its heraldic lion connects it with centuries of royal and national identity. On the other, its decimal value and modern design link it to the coming age of standardization and global commerce. It was a coin that reassured the public by its familiarity, even as it quietly prepared them for the sweeping change to come. In terms of everyday life, the coin soon became a standard part of daily transactions. Worth 1/10 of a pound, it was a significant denomination at the time, enough to buy small goods, bus fares, or a pint of milk. For a generation of Britons, the big 10 pence became an ordinary yet indispensable part of their purses and wallets. Yet even as it functioned in this mundane role, its larger meaning as a herald of change never entirely disappeared. When Decimal Day arrived on the 15th of February 1971, the British public was far better prepared because they had already been handling the 10 New Pence coin for 3 years. Numismatists often remark that the 1968 10 New Pence coin is a piece that embodies both continuity and rupture. Continuity, because its design draws on heraldic motifs and its size recalls the florin, anchoring it in the long tradition of British coinage. Rupture, because it was one of the first steps in discarding a system that had lasted for centuries. In this way, the coin is more than just metal, it is a document of cultural history, telling the story of how a nation negotiated the delicate balance between preserving tradition and embracing modernity. Please like and subscribe to my channel.